Spells for the south and the east in particular, thicker cloud towards the northwest, and further showers to come, especially around Irish Sea coast, western Scotland, Northern Ireland as well, one or two drifting into the Midlands. But temperatures in many places a degree or so higher compared with Saturday, because we'll have lost that northerly airflow. We're replacing it with more of a westerly airflow, and that trend continues into Monday. I think a lot of cloud out there, most places dry, and temperatures will be ticking up a degree or so higher compared with Sunday.
On Monday, we as the United Kingdom gather to mourn, pay tribute and give thanks to Queen Elizabeth II. Here at GB News, we invite you to gather with Anne Diamond, historian David Starkey, and myself, Alastair Stewart, live from Buckingham Palace, Westminster Abbey and Windsor Castle, all day Monday.
Hello and welcome to Alastair Stewart and Friends. I'm with you for the next 2 hours and we'd really love to hear from you. We are GB News. So, you queue for hours to pay your respects to the late Queen, and as you look back for that final glance before leaving Westminster Hall, you see her son and heir, the King, who was standing vigil with his brothers and sister. Last night, for a quarter of an hour leading up to around about 8 o'clock, that was the extraordinary experience for just some of the tens of thousands who've queued these last few days. And, in a gesture, perhaps of reconciliation, the Duke of York was allowed to wear full military uniform by his brother, the King. Well, earlier, the King had been to Wales, completing his tour of the United Kingdom. A duty, an obligation, or an attempt to shore up his troubled realm, where division is rife and calls for further devolution and even independence are strong. As world leaders pack their bags and eagerly book their audiences with the new King and his new Prime Minister ahead of or after Monday's state funeral, we're going to look at Charles's inheritance as head of state and as head of a mourning but slightly divided family. Can he pull it all back together again? I'm delighted to be joined by historian and biographer Sir Anthony Selden, top court correspondents and others to help us understand. But we'd really like to hear from you as well. Are we on the brink of a new golden age, or are we possibly at the threshold of a potential collapse of a cherished but illogical institution held together for 70 years by the remarkable woman we laid to rest on Monday? Do send your thoughts over to gbviews@gbnews.uk, tweet at GBNews or tweet me, or you can go on Facebook and we'll be reading the best out a little later in the programme. Well, to get that conversation going, I'm delighted to be joined first by Charles Ray, former royal correspondent for The Sun. He's sitting next to me here in the studio. And joining us down the line is Pandora Forsyth, who hosts the Daily Express Royal Roundup podcast. A very warm welcome to both of you. Stick with Pandora just for a moment, and then I'll come to Charles. We just showed the pictures of last night's vigil. First like that since 1936. What was your impression?
I mean, there has been nothing like this before, has there? It's so poignant. We see the royal family, the modern monarchy, a glimpse of it in action, and to see them all so publicly grieving, but also, you know, committing to their role of duty. The late Queen would have been so proud of her children all coming together, you know, as you said, as a sign of unity. It really was remarkable. And the fact that they had the public there as well as obviously other members of the royal family, remarkable pictures from last night. And I think we'll also see this evening, obviously, where we'll see some of her grandchildren as well doing the same thing. Yes, remarkable pictures.
Charles, we were saying just before we came into the studio, as Pandora rightly says, son there we saw, daughter, the other two sons as well, the grandchildren tonight. But last night, standing on that little balcony area in Westminster Hall, the great-grandchildren as well.
Yes, they were, with their mums and dads, which was really, really nice to see. I mean, the younger Tyndalls were obviously a bit distracted by it all, which is only understandable because of their age. But it was nice to see the whole family there. It, as Pandora says, yeah, a united family for a change, if you don't mind me saying so. It was united, and I think as well for all those people who had spent those hours and hours and hours standing in that queue to get...
So, Charles, let me interrupt just because folk at home watching on television, the two wee ones right in the middle are the Tyndall girls, and then to the right, I think that's Peter Phillips's
That's correct.
Daughters.
Yes, that's his two daughters. And I think with all those people who queued for hours and hours to not only get a glimpse of the late monarch, but lucky enough to get a glimpse of the new monarch.
That was the thing that struck me when I was watching it as a viewer last night. That's why I wrote my little introduction, just thinking, you know, you've queued up forever and you think, hang on a minute, is that the Duke of York? Yes, it is. And then as you look back, as everybody has told us they've done, there is the King.
Yes, the King, and you also get a good glimpse of Edward and the Princess Royal as well, so that's fascinating. I particularly am looking forward to the vigil tonight from the 8 grandchildren of the late Queen. I think that will be a particularly poignant tribute.
That's live pictures now for those of us watching, those of you watching on television. This is just continuing and continuing. Pandora, Charles and I are of a certain generation. You are from a younger generation. Has the scale of turnout, the queues, the numbers of people, be it weaving their way around London from Westminster down to Bermondsey or in Scotland or in Wales, have those numbers surprised you, or did you expect that?
I think the numbers haven't surprised me, but all generations are there. That is what has surprised me. The fact that you literally have parents pushing prams. We've seen the dogs in the queue. I mean, we really have seen everything all the way through to the elderly. It's every single generation. And, we've spoken about this before. There's obviously been lots of debates over the past few recent years of whether there is a place for the monarchy within this, modern world that we live in. But I think this does go to show, and also I think the King, our new King, should I say, will have a lot to live up to, because the Queen, even now, is still so popular. So I think it will be interesting to see how he will navigate the monarchy.
Pandora, forgive me, Pandora. We are looking at some of the guests there. The foreign, and there's Justin Trudeau just turning away, and bottom left of the picture now, Just bear with me with the picture. Now going out, Trudeau, I think it may have been Penny Mordaunt, and the fourth person disappearing there is the Australian Prime Minister. This is genuinely extraordinary. It is, don't get me wrong, I'm not getting emotional or overexcited, but this is a people's event for their monarch. But last night they saw the King standing vigil, and just now they're looking at it isn't Penny Mordaunt, it's indeed Mrs. Trudeau. My correction, my apologies. But that's the Prime Minister of Canada, who first met the late Queen when he was a little boy, and his father was Prime Minister of Canada, and walking behind is the, I think, Australian Prime Minister. Charles, I mean, it goes back to your point earlier. This is a family event. It is a global event.
It's a huge global event, and it reminds me of seeing Justin Trudeau there, where the Queen made one of her witty speeches when she saw Justin Trudeau, and he made a reference to his father, Pierre Trudeau, and she stood up and said, "Oh, thank you for the Prime Minister of Canada for making me feel so old." It was quite a nice. And just one thing I'd like to say is that we don't know yet how many people are paying homage to the monarch at the moment, but let me just put some context on it. When the Queen Mother lay in Westminster Hall, there were 200,000 people that went past it. That is far surpassed now. When Princess Diana died and she lay at St James's, there wasn't these people passing by, but 1 million people came out onto the street to watch that funeral. 1 million people. It is staggering.
Yes.
That's not counting the days beforehand.
And I butt in again. We were just looking there at the queue going westward with the Palace of Westminster in the background, and at the east of that building, there we are, thank you, Mr. Director, to the east of that building is indeed Westminster Hall. To the left, you can see the Victoria Tower. But these people are walking away from it, as it were, having queued goodness knows how long. Then they'll go over Lambeth Bridge, then they'll come back the other way along Millbank, if you know London. But those are the two great thoroughfares on either side of the River Thames. And still they come, and still they come. And that queue winds all the way back to Bermondsey. So you stay with us here on GB News, because you won't miss a thing. We have cameras here amongst the queue. We're also on Abingdon Green as they get a little bit closer, and that clump of trees, middle of the picture to the left, that's Victoria Park, which is the area that they're gathering in before then being shepherded into Westminster Hall. We have all of that for you, and also we'll keep our little eyes peeled just in case, suddenly out of the blue, the Prime Ministers of this country or that country suddenly turn up. And that is the scene within Westminster Hall as the members of the public come in. This is partly a service warning, but also partly a little bit of news. The queue is in Southwark Park, and the waiting time is now up to 14 hours. That's good news. When I woke up this morning to go get my newspapers at 6 o'clock, I think it was 24 hours. So they're clearly moving them along well, and they are safely. But, and this really does matter, if the park reaches capacity, then entry to the queue will be paused, because that whole process has a limited period of time and must end at 6 o'clock on Monday morning, so that preparations for the state funeral can begin. Just while we keep that up there for you to make a mental note if you're still thinking of it, I want to bring Pandora back in. We're looking at London Pandora, but I also said in my introductory comments that the King's completed the tour of his United Kingdom. Naturally, it all began in Scotland, where the late Queen died, and he went to Edinburgh. He made an important speech. He has been to Northern Ireland, met with important people there, both from the north and the south of the border there, and yesterday was Wales. How united do you see his kingdom being, Pandora?
Currently, right now, I think that everybody has welcomed the King within those areas, and I think it's really important for him to keep those relationships up. Obviously, we've got a new Prince and Princess of Wales who do at the moment seem to be very, very popular as well. So I think he'll have quite a task on his hands, but he's been extremely open with the public, which is actually quite different from his late mother, who was reserved. But it seems that he's happy to chat to the public. He's well aware of the issues. You know, yesterday in the papers, or should I say today's papers, he's aware of the cost of living crisis, which is happening right now. He's aware of these issues, which are current and actually really serious that people are facing. So as long as he keeps up acknowledging what's happening right now and doesn't live within that small bubble, then I think we will see a positive welcoming to the King beyond the state funeral after Monday.
It is extraordinary, Charles, isn't it, that when the late Queen came to the throne, certainly Ireland was an issue, there's no doubt about it, and has been an issue since the 1920s when Northern Ireland was created. But talk of independence for Scotland and devolution or independence for Wales was very much a minority sport.
It was.
The King inherits a country which is wrestling with itself in Northern Ireland, has devolution in Wales and quite fancies more, although to his great credit, Mark Drayford said yesterday, now is not the time to talk about it. And certainly Nicola Sturgeon is desperate for another referendum on independence.
You're absolutely right. And I think all we've seen at the moment is a quietening of all these problems. I mean, we'll have the official mourning, the country's mourning over on Monday. The royal family will continue to mourn for the following week. However, we're back to our problems again. The fuel crisis, as you quite rightly say, the discussions about devolution in Scotland and in Wales, and everything else that's cropping up, where the train strike will be back on again. So none of this has gone away. It's just been held in abeyance for a short while, and I'm not sure what. Yes, it's nice for the new King to acknowledge that he is aware of the problems. What he himself can do about them, I'm not terribly sure. That is a matter for the government.
You mentioned in the middle of that the cost of living crisis, and I was minded when I read that. I heard it last night, but I read it in more detail this morning. And I'm going to be talking to Anthony Selden about it, because one of the most important bits in that first address that the then new King made to the nation was heart-moving, where he said, I recognise in my new role that I have to back away from some of the causes that I have pushed so hard over the years and the issues which I have embraced over the years, because as King he has to take a different stance to it. He hoped others would carry on with them, not least his son and the Prince of Wales' wife, Catherine. But in Wales, he's talking about the cost of living crisis.
Yes, he is, and I suspect...
That's up front and centre.
That is up front and centre, and I suspect that what's going to be happening is very much like the old Queen. He will, in his audience with the Prime Minister, be able to give his views on various subjects and matters. She may not listen to him, but at least he will be expressing them. She will know what he thinks about them.
Pandora, let me bring you in on that as well, because it's almost nuanced, as Charles just said so elegantly. But to me, that bit in that opening address to the nation was crucial, because it's about constitutionality. It is about the role of the head of state. It's fine for others to espouse their causes, but do you think he redefined it with what he said to Mark Drayford in Wales yesterday? Can we hear Pandora?
Obviously, it's all change. You know, we've got a whole new PM, and now we've got a new monarch. Hopefully, the fact that they're both new and fresh to this role, they can actually hear one another's opinions. But yes, he does have an extremely fine line to go down. But I think he also is well aware from all the work that he's been doing with the Prince's Trust, for instance, working with deprived families. You know, he's well aware, and he's seen firsthand how much this crisis will be affecting them. So I think some issues he'll be much more passionate about talking to the new PM about than others. Obviously, climate change also being one of them too.
Sure. Pandora, thank you very much indeed. Final thought in this chunk with Charles, and you're kindly agreed to come back at 1 o'clock, I hope.
Yes, of course.
I don't want to be accused of indulging in sycophancy or just, oh, everything's perfect and hunky-dory, and I hope we've made that clear in this conversation. But just looking at things from what some have said was a bit of petulance over the leaky pen that when he was signing the articles of accession, just occasional examples of impatience. My own personal view is I don't blame him for a minute. You know, he's under enormous pressure constitutionally, but he's also just lost his mum, for goodness sakes. Lay off. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. And you and I both know that Twitter, most of the people who are on Twitter are sitting at home waiting to be offended by something or other. And if the king cannot have the right equipment, a pen, it's amazing that the king hasn't got a pen that's working. And I think that as well that the two ink monitors responsible for showing this bit of petulance will be serving next out of Mongolia.
Yeah, nicely put. And just as you were coming to a conclusion, the perfect decision there by the team outside. These are pictures from yesterday of the King in Wales, and just a moment ago, the previous shot you saw the First Minister of Wales walking behind him, and the woman on his left shoulder is the Speaker of the Senate. This is at the Senate, so there we are. The King going about his business and talking to the leading lights and the ordinary people of Wales. Now, Monday's state funeral will see the armed services at their very best, from the perfect precision of the Guards Division and other regiments, I hasten to add, because I know other people are watching as well, via my partiality, the equestrian elegance of the Household Cavalry and others, to the strength, the sheer physical strength of the naval ratings, pulling that gun carriage, and there they are. And we also know that the music from Army, Navy, Air Force and Gurkhas will be performed to perfection. The late Queen loved her soldiers, sailors and airmen, and they loved her to the boss, to whom they took their oaths. Her charities will be in their numbers too, not least the military charities that offer that elegant bridge between active service and care at a time of need for wounded heroes, their spouses, their children, and indeed their orphans. So I'm delighted to welcome Lieutenant General Sir Andrew Gregory, Chief Executive Officer of SAFA, which stands for the Soldiers, Sailors and Air Force Association, and himself a former Chief of Defence People at the Ministry of Defence. It's so good to see you. Was I, again, I don't want to be accused of anything, but I don't think as an Air Force son I was overstating that relationship between whether you're a junior lance corporal or a four-star general. It is love.
You weren't overstating it, and it is love. We all take the Queen's shilling. We served her. We were very proud to serve her. She could not have epitomised more the values that we all seek to follow. So it's been an honour. And during my service, 35 years in the Army...
You were a gunner.
I am. I'm always, once a gunner, always a gunner. So.
My father said the same about being a navigator.
OK. And I have a role still in the Gunners, and we might talk about that in a minute. Yeah. But just a little bit about SAFA, and I'm going to correct you slightly about the title. Formed in 1885 to look after families left behind when troops went overseas, out came the Soldiers and Sailors Families Association.
I'm grateful for that, and I genuinely didn't know that.
And now we are the Soldiers, Sailors, Airmen's and Families Association. So supporting military families is very important because it's very difficult. People go overseas and the families have the worry and the stress.
People who are kind enough to watch this programme know that wherever I can grab a personal example, I chuck it in for the sake of conversation. Yeah. My daughter was a teacher in Aldershot for a while, and amongst her pupils was a fabulous mixture of Gurkha children, but also regulars, commandos, whatever regiments happened to be in Aldershot at the time. And she said you could always tell when Dad was away and when Dad came back. The little ones are barometers.
It was very interesting. SAFA, the Armed Forces charity, ran a reception in the Houses of Parliament to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Falklands campaign, which obviously is this year. And Penny Mordaunt kindly came and spoke superbly and talked about how she was a 9-year-old in Portsmouth and some of her classmates were taken away to be told they had lost.
Her dad was a para, I think.
Her dad was a para.
And she's a naval reservist.
She is an officer in the Naval Reserve and passionately supportive, just as Her Majesty was. And so that's where SAFA very much kicks in to support people. We supported Falkland veterans. We're still supporting them.
Do you sense that the King shares that personal passion for the men and women who wear what is now his uniform?
Absolutely. And I say that I've met His Majesty on a number of occasions. I've been lucky enough to. And I can say that with complete certainty. He will pick up the mantle that sadly his mother has had to give up. And he is our Commander-in-Chief. And I know he will support our armed forces and the people in them. Absolutely, I do.
I want to share this with you. One of my team has a brother serving in the Royal Air Force, and he wrote on the occasion of the Queen's death, and I quote, "What an honour it's been to serve you these past 10 years, devoted to us all, leading the way with a set of morals that all of us agree what it is to be British, and with a cheeky smile. R.I.P. Boss."
Wonderful words. And I think what we're seeing since Her Majesty died 9 days ago, the time people are spending queuing to pay their respects to her, the national sense is absolutely part of that. And if I can give you one example, I also have a role in the Royal Artillery. I'm the Master Gunner St James's Park, the head of the regiment. So I went to visit the King's Troop, Royal Horse Artillery, yesterday. They obviously have been very busy. They had the honour of carrying Her Majesty from Buckingham Palace to the Palace of Westminster on Wednesday. Half the troop were on leave 9 days ago. 2 young gunners were sat in their seats on a plane ready to fly on holiday to Cyprus. When they got the news, they said to the cabin crew, "We have got to get off." They got their luggage out of the hold. They have come back. They're both 19. They are on parade. That is how important it is.
Extraordinary. One of my favourite pieces in what we have in a purple patch of journalism at the moment, but in the Daily Telegraph, and you underlining, as you did so elegantly there, your role as far as the families are concerned, there's a woman called Lucy Denyer has written at the bottom of page 2 in the Daily Telegraph, "Honoured to watch my husband standing vigil by the Queen's coffin."
I read that this morning.
Wasn't that? I mean, it's beautifully written. Puts many a hack to shame, does that piece?
So I think all of us, and I, as Master Gunner, am honoured, really honoured, to be part of the procession from Westminster Abbey to the Wellington Arch on Monday. I will do my senior officer's drill is notoriously bad. I will do my very best to make sure I honour Her Majesty and honour our King.
Just looking at a member of the Royal Company of Archers, the monarch's bodyguard in Scotland, I should add, and again, something I found very, very moving, because I know him a bit, but Ben Wallace, the Secretary of State for Defence, who is a member of the Royal Company of Archers, standing vigil where those two guys at the front of the picture are, and on the left, Alastair Jack, the Secretary of State for Scotland. But Ben was also a Scots Guards, as it were, in real life. I mean, this is an honorary and delightful function of sort of chivalry and the rest of it. But it is an amazing mixture, and you're a general, so you know what I'm getting at here, where you can have the Royal Company of Archers, you can have Household Division Guardsmen, you can have, they hate being called beefeaters, but Yeomen of the Guard from the Tower of London. In that little picture that we were just looking there, now we just got the bear scan of one of the guards, it is a little tableau of everything that is military, but also everything that is honorary in the protection of and the service of the Crown.
We are all ordinary people, and we come to serve this nation. And whether you go on to be a general or remain, in my regiment, a gunner, we're all there to serve. And when we were out, particularly in difficult places like Iraq and Afghanistan, the support of each individual for each other is fundamental. And going back to Her Majesty, I think that's what she espoused, and that's why her death is a huge loss, and we all mourn. And you talked about the pressure on Prince Charles, beg your pardon, King Charles, slip of the tongue, and we sympathise with His Majesty, but all of us feel we've lost somebody.
I can't have a Lieutenant General sitting in the studio with me without asking, not a blunt question, but I know from my social media and my circle of friends that the biggest contingency of people who wanted the Duke of York to be able to wear uniform last night because he was an active fighting man, and you mentioned the Falklands once already, and I remember those pictures of his helicopter drawing fire from warships. Real stuff, not actors, real stuff. And you mentioned Afghanistan just then, and Harry will be allowed to wear uniform tonight, who did not one but 2 active duties of service in Afghanistan. How important is that to the military family? Just before you answer that, sorry, pause simply because it's GB News and we're now live in southeast London. Ignore the bit at the top left-hand corner for a moment. That's wrong. This is southeast London. Remember we were saying earlier on, and that's the bodyguard just to his right shoulder, that these are folk who are queuing to pay homage, say thank you, bow, offer open hands, offer the sign of the cross to his late mother. This is way, way back to the eastern part of London, and they're happy. Look at those faces. They are smiling. They're having a quiet word. This is a period of solemnity. It's a period of national mourning. We're only about 3/4 of the way through that period of national mourning, but the King has judged that it is right and proper that he be with his people and share that, but as he has done amongst the crowds in Scotland, in Northern Ireland, and yesterday in Wales, to bring some warmth and some love and a brief conversation with a couple there who will never forget it. I'm not a lip reader, but I'm thinking the King is simply saying, thank you for being here, shake hands. And yes, in 2022, you're allowed to take a photograph of the King. I'm just pausing so that you can take in these pictures. Be judgmental if you will, but the evidence is there before you. These are live pictures in South London, and that is the King, and those are his subjects. Going to let those pictures run, and General Andrew, come back in, if you will, where you left off, because these are ordinary folk. There may well be serving men and women amongst them, or wives, girlfriends, boyfriends, the rest of it, and what have you. But you were just about to encapsulate that point about the service community.
I was, and there will be servicemen and women, veterans and families in this queue, waiting many, many hours to pay their respects to Her Majesty. I think what the armed forces in this country encapsulates is a sense of service, a sense of values, a sense of standards. We do that because we want to uphold the law, we want to uphold democracy. We take our orders from His Majesty's government, and that is exactly how it should be. And during my service, I think people have performed well. I think they are better for their military service. And when they come out, they go on to be great employees. And SAFA, the Armed Forces Charity, is there just to help those who might have a wobble at some stage.
Just as General Andrew is finishing their little cheer as well from the crowd, and we're going to stick with these pictures because they are what they are. As I said, they're live pictures. That is the King, and these are his subjects across the spectrum there in South London. Let me come back to you, Charles, to pick up on what General Andrew was just saying there. We also noticed, because we were chatting about these things last night, going back to the vigil that we were watching, it was intriguing to note the number of people who made the sign of the cross, Christian symbol, offered the open hands, very much Muslim, Islamic symbol, and bowed, which the King is wont to do occasionally in an appropriate mix. But that number of people who stood rigidly to attention and offered a salute. We know who they were, or perhaps still are.
Yes, they are. They clearly have been in service in the armed forces, or still, as you quite rightly say, still are. They wanted to pay their respects, as you said, Andrew. They wanted to turn out, and it was their opportunity to do so. I'm just staggered that they're standing around for up to 16 hours just to get that one little glimpse, and if they were lucky, they got a glimpse of the King as well.
Pandora, I haven't spoken to you for a wee while because I'm going to tell you the truth and share it with our lovely viewers and listeners that I thought you'd gone. How terribly! You should have shouted at me. Are you watching an off-air monitor? Can you see what's going on?
I can certainly see what's going on, yes.
Well, then, I tell you, I love live journalism and I love live pictures. Just tell me, Pandora, what you make of what you're seeing live now from South London with the King and his subjects.
He didn't have to do this, but he's done it. No one would blame him if he would, until Monday, go and have a private moment as he did earlier on this week. No one would blame him, but yet he's still out there reading the public's opinion, reading the room, meeting fellow mourners who all share the same thing, right? Respect for the late Queen, his mother. He will never get the opportunity again like this to meet so many people who are all there for the same reason, who are waiting hours to just have that moment with the late Queen. I think this actually, for him, maybe is part of sort of the whole process of mourning, and to have the respect there for the Queen, which, you know, the public opinion has shifted within the 70 years of reign, as it does for any public figure. And yeah, as I said, he didn't have to do this, and he's doing it. I think it's a great, a great move to actually introduce himself to the country.
Pandora, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to just ask General Andrew, to pick up on something that I just spotted there. And you're a military man, you're not a spook or anything like that, but in the background was headquarters of MI5, and we saw Millbank Tower to the left, Conservative Party headquarters. It was at one stage. I don't know if it still is. But then just a Metropolitan Police officer standing there. That can't happen in many countries, that we can do it peacefully on a Saturday afternoon in London with the monarch and one bodyguard. I recognise him, the guy with the beard. I'm sure there are others in the crowd. I'm sure there are other security presences as well. But there's something amazing about this unfolding of a Saturday afternoon in his United Kingdom.
I think it's extraordinary, and I think it's wonderful, and I think it's humbling, and I think it's deeply moving, actually, looking at both these images and understanding what they mean. And to see the King, I thought Pandora's words were spot on. He didn't have to do this.
Andrew, let me butt in. Again, I'm sure folk watching on television know immediately that that's the new Prince of Wales to the left of the picture now. And for those who are kind enough to be listening to us on GB News Radio, we are now just finished looking at the King, doing exactly what Prince of Wales is doing, out and about, Saturday afternoon, going to chat to people in South East London who are queuing to join the vigil to his late grandmother and the King's late mother. Truly extraordinary. Charles?
If you look at the faces of the people, they're all smiles. Their eyes are bright. They want to see the Prince of Wales. They want to see the King.
Look, a hand hovering, and he's got it.
He's coming. He does that, and he did that at Windsor the other night, as did the Harry and Meghan as well as Catherine. And this is fabulous stuff that the people are getting to see the Prince of Wales and the King. You won't get this again like this.
Andrew, I was saying as well to Charles earlier on, the images last night of the vigil where folk came in, and the first image they got, unexpectedly perhaps, if they recognised him, was Andrew, Duke of York.
Yeah.
And some of them would have thought, oh, what else are you doing? And then either they went that way and saw the Earl of Wessex, or they went that way and saw the Princess Royal. And then as they turned around for that final glance, they saw the King. So there they are, queuing to go and see the late Queen. They don't only get the King, they get the Prince of Wales.
An even greater privilege, you know, and for everyone who's waited. You asked me earlier about wearing uniform. I think the King has made a great decision. He is seeking to bring his family together, and for Prince Andrew, Prince Harry, to honour the fact they too served, and you've highlighted that. I think the King, it's not for me to judge, but I support his decision 100%.
Yeah.
And for the public, they just want to pay their respects to Her Majesty, and to have other members of the royal family there is even more special.
Just letting these pictures roll because they are live. And with apologies if you were watching 2 or 3 minutes ago, we had a bit of a wobble. I think the camera person was either nudged, pushed, or
I'd had a little too much to drink.
One of the greatest. There are two great skills in being a brilliant camera person. One is keeping in focus, and the other is an infinite capacity to walk backwards without falling over. And alas, cables occasionally get in the way, and the rest of it. Now, that's interesting as well, because I think that's a Welsh police officer looking into the crowd, and ahead of Monday's state funeral, the police, Metropolitan Police, Scotland Yard, was saying last night it's the biggest single security event they've ever had to deal with. And indeed, police forces from around the United Kingdom have offered up officers to come and join in. But I think that Headloo is the Welsh.
Yes, it is Welsh.
Police.
And what a baptism of fire for the new commissioner. What a baptism of fire for the new commissioner. It's amazing. He's got to take this job on.
Former head of anti-terrorism.
Former head of anti-terrorism.
Knows a thing or two about security.
But I think when police are called from all corners of the kingdom, they will be honoured, just as military people are honoured to be part of this. And it is a security challenge, absolutely right. But, you know, I think our system and organisation will make sure it works.
OK, I'm going to ask both of you to hang on there. I don't know what your diary is like, but I hope you've got it, because there are many other things that I want to chat to both of you about. I've already booked you, Charles, so that's all right, but I wanted to check with Andrew as well. So we're going to do... my two guests very kindly have agreed to hang on, because there are one or two other things that I want to talk to them about, and I know, because I can read the body language, that they want to chip in as well. But these are live pictures. There we go, a little bit wobbly again. Oops. Come on. He's repositioning the camera, I'm being told in my ear, and best he might do. So we are watching live pictures as that There we are. Thank you very much indeed. And we cut back to a different camera, and there was a woman's hand just quietly going up and down the arm of... some bloke she's never met before who happens to be the Prince of Wales. It's that kind of mourning. These are people queuing to go and pay their respects at the vigil to the late Queen. And there is her grandson, heir apparent to the new king, mixing with the crowd. Our correspondent, our reporter Jeff Moody, is down there as well, and we've asked him to try and give us a sense of what the reaction is down there in South London to these extraordinary events as not only the King but also the Prince of Wales go walkabout. Jeff.
In fact, I think we started a little bit earlier than that. The sun has been shining. It's been a really good atmosphere so far, very jovial. But then we are in early days. We've only been going 2 or 3 hours, so we're not too tired quite yet. But I've managed to drag a couple of people out of the queue so they can have a chat with me. Good morning to you, madam.
Good morning.
Now I've no idea what day of the week it is. We're hearing that the King has been out and about greeting the people in the queues. We haven't seen him down this end, unfortunately, have we?
No, but it would be lovely to see him and Prince William, who I think is with him.
Wouldn't it just? I mean, what an amazing thing. I mean, this really could be his weekend off, couldn't he? To actually give him a bit of time to think about what's happened and just take it all in.
Yeah, I just think it's wonderful if he's coming out to meet the people, and hopefully it's a bit of a source of comfort to him to know how much the Queen meant to us all. The very fact that we're queuing for hours to pay our respects, I hope it brings him some comfort.
Where did you come from today?
North Yorkshire, near Thirsk. Yeah.
So you've had a fair old journey already.
Quite a journey, yes. Yeah.
And what about you?
I came from Boston, United States.
Ah, I don't hear a Bostonian accent though.
No, you don't. I've actually lived there most of my adult life at this point, but even though I went to the States, you can take the girl out of Britain, but you can't take Britain out of the girl.
So, did that feel like a real pull to you then? When you heard about the Queen, you thought, I really need to come here?
Definitely. I really felt that I needed to be here because to honour her commitment that she made when she was 25, to make service for the rest of her life, 70 years, not only for the British people, but for people all the way around the world. She gave us so much continuity through so much change.
So we're going to be experiencing this together, aren't we? We've experienced it together so far. My back's aching a little bit, but apart from that, I am all right. So how are we faring to start with?
I think we're doing okay, aren't we? We've got supplies between us of food and drink, and yeah, I think we'll be okay. We've got warm clothing to wear for the early hours.
Yes, because we could, I mean, it's all very well now, isn't it? The sun's shining, it's very nice, but we could be here until the wee small hours. We it could even be tomorrow morning by the time we get there. How do you think we're going to feel when we actually get there?
Well, it's like fasting. I think we'll be okay because there is, you get a clarity when you're just focused on one purpose, and it's almost better if you don't eat. But I've got my stuff here. I think we'll be fine. We might do some yoga stretches, but I've got my hat and my coat and my gloves, and I came prepared.
Good, and lots of sweets, no doubt.
Yes, yeah.
And how do you think you'll react when we actually get there, when we're walking through Westminster Hall and we're seeing the coffin? How do you think, can you give some sort of sense of what you might feel?
I think it's probably going to be a bit surreal, very quiet, very respectful probably. It's hard to tell until you're in that situation, but I just think it's going to be worth it to pay our respects.
It is. It's something that we've got to do, haven't we?
Yeah. Yes.
It's important to pay our respects, but also just to experience the whole thing. I mean, this is what I'm feeling, It will be amazing at the end to go and see that site and to experience that, and it'll be something that we'll never forget, will we? Which I think is why we're here,
Yeah, that was part of why I came, to be part of something in British history, in our history, the only monarch that we've ever known, potentially the greatest monarch this country's ever had.
Absolutely. Well, we've got a few more hours to go, but we'll be reporting in every now and again just to let you know how we're getting on. And I've got a change of footwear at some point. I'll get into my trainers, but not quite yet. I'm all right in my shoes for now.
All right. Jeff, thank you very much indeed, and through you, thank you to your lovely guests. Lovely to hear the authentic voice of people who've spent so much time waiting to do that. And these are live pictures of South London, and the King has finished his walkabout. I'd hate to be the person saying, it's over, sir, in the car, because he began to get towards the car and then he saw another group of people in the crowd. He darted over and said goodbye to them. An extraordinary thing to have watched that, both him and also the Prince of Wales, just chatting to people, and at its heart saying thank you for taking time out of your busy lives to join a queue to come and join this remarkable image of the late Queen lying in state in Westminster Hall, surrounded by her bodyguards, yeomen, warders, known as beefeaters, and members of the Royal Company of archers. Charles, final thought on that, particularly unexpected. You and I knew what we were going to talk about. General Andrew and I knew what we were going to talk about. But we've just sat here, the three of us, and Pandora at home, fixed on a live event.
Yeah. And
which is all about the United Kingdom.
It is all about the United Kingdom. And for those people who either shook hands with the King or the Prince of Wales, it's a memory that they will take with them to their graves. They will never, ever forget that. You know, I speak as someone who's been lucky enough to meet members of the royal family. I've got those memories. No one can ever take them away from you. And it is just fantastic. And I think this is just showing you just how united we really are as a country. Yes, we'll get back to the problems in a week or so or whatever else, but just now we are totally united. And the other interesting thing about all these people is they are meeting people in a queue that they've never seen before, and they're spending hours with them, and they're going to end up being firm friends for life.
General Andrew, your thoughts?
It's unifying, isn't it? And before Her Majesty died on the 8th of September, there was a huge amount of division and acrimony, and that has gone away. And let us hope that post the funeral on Monday the 19th, people reflect again about service and about working together. And wouldn't that be a wonderful final legacy of this extraordinary lady?
Yeah. Can I get a final thought from Pandora, but before that, a final thought from you, if I may, which is one of those things I did want to ask you about. Is the Commonwealth is not a given. The Commonwealth is something that member states acquiesce to, agree to be a part of. They're not forced to. And both the King and the man we're looking at live in South London right now, the Prince of Wales, have both said if a country wishes to leave the Commonwealth, it is entirely a matter for them. But given that we know from the Duke of Norfolk, the Earl Marshal, that the late Queen's fingerprints were over every detail of what we will see at the state funeral on Monday, it is to be led by Canadian mounted police. It is to include soldiers from New Zealand, and it is to include contingents from the armed services of Australia. I see a little signal.
Countries will make their own decisions, and that is entirely right. But I think the unity and the sense of shared purpose brought by the Commonwealth is really important. On Thursday night, I met, as the Master Gunner St James's Park, with my equivalents, the Colonel Commandant of the Royal Canadian Artillery, the Colonel Commandant of the Royal New Zealand Artillery, and the Royal Australian Artillery, and indeed the Indian Defence Attaché, who happens to be a gunner. We came together and we shared a sense of purpose and passion. And those links will endure.
And also, to only butt in, just to remind folk, if they've just joined us, that these pictures are live. This is actually happening right now in South London. Prince of Wales meeting the crowd. He and the Princess of Wales went up to, is it Purbright, I think they went to, where they met the New Zealanders and the Australians.
Yes, who had the privilege of being in the procession.
Yeah, as Charles said, you know, memories you'll never forget. You come all the way from New Zealand and Australia to do your duty, and that man shakes hands with you.
And when they met the New Zealand soldiers yesterday, they did a haka for the Prince and Princess of Wales. I mean, I love the haka. I just think it's absolutely fantastic. What a way to salute the Prince and Princess of Wales.
Your King.
Your King.
Sorry. The Prince,
well, your Prince of Wales. Sorry, I've got a rock as well.
No, I think we'll see where countries go. But it's about values. It's about a sense of purpose. And the King will pick up the legacy of his mother. We're in good hands.
Excellent. For the time being, thank you both very much indeed. Pandora, I want to bring you in, and I made that distinction, oh, goodness me, what is it? It's 8 minutes to 1 now, so it would have been about 40 minutes ago, about Charles Ray and I being of a certain age and you being that certain age minus about 40 at least, if not more. Just listening to General Andrew there talk about the Commonwealth, very crisp analysis, but at the end he said it's a matter for people, people will do what they need to. Do you sense amongst the younger generation there is as much warmth to the Commonwealth as perhaps there is amongst older generations?
I think there is. However, I would say in the younger generation, they are genuinely interested at the royal family's relationships together. They want to see a unit, and they don't want to see, a divide. just from those pictures that we've just seen, obviously we've seen a father-son relationship there, but obviously over the past few years it has, lots of speculation about various people's relationships within the royal family. And I think from the younger generation, we just want to see unity, and I just hope that this is bringing them all together. We've seen them all together now. We'll obviously see them more, whether that be obviously organised for the state funeral on Monday, but maybe tomorrow again for like an ad hoc visit like this that we don't know about. Perhaps we will see them again. But I think people care in my generation that they're all getting along because of the privilege that they have. That, my generation do want to see that they are thankful for that privilege that they do hold. I think that's the key. And as long as they are getting along and they understand that, then I think, good times are ahead.
Pandora, thank you very much indeed for those observations. And as you were speaking there, for those who are listening to our conversations on radio rather than watching it on television, we're still looking at live pictures of the Prince of Wales in South London, and no sign of that queue shrinking, but as I hope they know, bless their hearts, that it winds a fair old way behind them. That's bad news for those at the end of it, but they are getting a bit closer. They just complete that wander along and they will be within striking distance of their target, which we just showed you, and that is the magnificence of the Great Hall in Westminster. And they will get there as the Prince of Wales continues to bring huge smiles to just the most amazing range of faces. Now, earlier on, his dad, the King, was doing exactly the same thing to exactly the same reaction. We then saw him clamber aboard the Rolls-Royce limousine that whisked him back to Buckingham Palace. And I'm delighted to say that Darren McCaffrey joins us live now from Buckingham Palace. Darren, quite extraordinary scenes that we are looking at live now in South London. What's the scene at Buckingham Palace?
Well, just more crowds, Alastair, is the honest answer in all of this. As you say, those scenes in Lambeth, just south of the river, next to the Palace of Westminster, those people queuing for hours, quite extraordinary. As you say, King Charles has just arrived back, actually, at Buckingham Palace in the last minute or so, and there are people who've been outside the palace for a very long time this morning and this afternoon, who cheered clearly his arrival. And it is fascinating, this, Alastair, isn't it? You've covered this for many, many years. We didn't really see this with Her Majesty the Queen. Yes, she did walkabout. She didn't shake anyone's hand, it must be said. And even the walkabout, in some ways, was a relatively new invention. But what we're seeing from the new king, from King Charles III, is a very deliberate attempt to try and meet as many people as possible, to shake as many hands, to have as many conversations as possible since he became king. He's done exactly what we've seen today in Edinburgh, in Cardiff, in Belfast, indeed here at Buckingham Palace as well. And it's clear he wants to do that, and he's going to do it a lot more, I suspect, in the weeks, months and years to come. And the other extraordinary thing is just the sheer numbers of people here. I've been travelling around, clearly over the last week or so, but I was in London last weekend, and the numbers of people in central London today are significantly higher than we saw last Saturday and Sunday, from my estimation. And there are queues, not just the queue to go into Westminster Hall to see the Queen lying in state. There are queues of people to get to Buckingham Palace, to get close to the gates as the cars come in and out. And I think we've just seen the Princess of Wales go in relatively recently as well. And then there is another queue in the park next to me, the Green Park, where people are queuing up to lay flowers at the garden they've set aside there in memory of the Queen. And it just gives you a sense, I think, of the sheer numbers of people that have come from all over the country. I've just spoken to a woman who's got the train up from Bournemouth this morning. Another person, the sleeper train from Devon overnight. Just this sense that people want to be here, whether it's at Buckingham Palace, whether it's outside the Palace of Westminster, whether it's in Green Park. A real sense that lots and lots of people will just want to be in the centre of London today and be part of this, be part of history.
Darren, you referring to the fact that we've covered this sort of stuff, and what we are seeing right now in front of us is the Prince of Wales carrying on doing something that he and his wife have become accustomed to. But just a moment ago, as you so rightly say, his father, the King, redefining that relationship. And I think a few days ago we saw a member of the crowd kiss the King for the first time. No dash of security people, no resiling from that from the King. But I want to pick your brain a bit as well, bearing in mind your political editor status as well. Let's not forget for a moment that the Prince of Wales, who we're looking at now, and the King, who you saw just go back to work, are exactly that. Tomorrow evening, they have one of the most important gatherings to be held at Buckingham Palace in a very long time. From President Biden to the Emperor of Japan to the President of France, they've got to know who's who, they've got to know what the issues are. You don't make small talk at that level, Darren, do you? You've got to know what you're up to.
No, you definitely don't. Just to pick up very briefly on the crowd situation as well, and the Prince of Wales and King Charles. It's fascinating. One of King Charles's bodyguards, who is clearly talking to the crowd just before the King arrives, it does tell everyone to kind of put down their phones. It's not a moment to take a picture. It's a moment to remember. It's a moment to reach out your hand, to have a conversation. And it's really interesting that in some ways people need to be told that, but they all do that. Let's talk about the diplomacy here. We are going to see the largest gatherings of heads of government, heads of states, leaders, kings, emperors, princes, that we've ever seen in London, or certainly I would say since the state funeral of Winston Churchill back in 1965. And this is a moment. I mean, clearly they're here to remember Her Majesty the Queen and to attend that funeral on Monday. But this is an important moment for the UK as well, diplomatically, and we can't get away from that. There's a big reception, as you say, on Sunday night, hosted by the King, and that will be a really important moment, because it's an exercise, let's be frank about this, of Britain's soft power. And it is a sign, isn't it, of the strength of Britain's soft power by the very essence that there are 500 leaders coming here to London to pay tribute to Her Majesty and also to meet the new King. And indeed our politicians, because we're going to have people like President Joe Biden here. We're going to have Emmanuel Macron, the French president, the Chinese vice president. As I say, you could go across the world. We're going to have an awful lot of diplomacy happening. And the Prime Minister, we know, is separately going to meet some of those leaders on the sidelines, if you like. And again, an important moment for her, considering she's just taken up the job. Today she's meeting the Australian Prime Minister and the New Zealand Prime Minister down at Chevening. So it is a moment for remembrance, but as I say, let's be frank, it is also a moment for our politicians to flex some diplomatic muscles as well.
And just as you were drawing your comments to a conclusion, we saw that the Prince of Wales has now departed the line that is waiting to head to that place, the magnificence, as I said earlier, of Westminster Hall, in what most people refer to as the Houses of Parliament, but it is the Royal Palace of Westminster. And it's now just slipped past 1 o'clock. We didn't want to interrupt what Darren was saying, just to give you a time check. But it is, if you're watching the clock, 2 minutes past 1 o'clock, and you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News as another group of gentlemen archers, the Royal Company of Gentlemen Archers, Grenadier Guards, yeoman warders, beefeaters to you and me, but yeoman warders to them, come down the steps in Westminster Hall as that rat-a-tat-tat that happens every 20 minutes will occur, and they will change and shuffle the pack, doing that great and solemn duty, which, as General Sir Andrew said to me just a moment ago, is a total and undiluted pleasure and honour for each and every member of the armed services who is called upon to do it. Pandora and Charles are still with me. Charles first, and then Pandora, just to reflect on the question I put to Darren and his incredibly important answer, if I may say so. And that is, yes, it's lovely to see rock star-style walkabouts, and the folk who experienced it will have loved every moment of it. But both the King and the Prince of Wales are working members of our constitutional settlement. And the King will go back to Buckingham Palace and read and reread his notes and reread his red boxes. It's what made the late Queen so special. She knew everyone and she knew everything.
Absolutely. And we have to remember that the King and the Prince of Wales have been grieving in public in a great way, but they've still got a job to do. And even the so-called day off that the King had on Wednesday wasn't a day off. He was still reading private papers. He was still reading government papers. He was still contacting various heads of state around the world. So there wasn't a time off. And what was nice today, I've been worried about the King because of the grief etched on his face over the last few days. But today the smiles were back. This was for him and the people to get together.
Yeah. Pandora, your thoughts on that, as it were? It's almost homework time, and I'm sure that the smiles and handshakes and affection of the public that the King has just witnessed on those live pictures that we brought to you down in South London. But it is back to school. It is back to homework time, isn't it?
It certainly is, and it has been that way for the past few days. Yes, we are seeing him in public. We're obviously seeing him grieving in public, and we are, appreciating that. And it is a huge, heavy task that he's just taken on. Obviously, he has been by his late mother's side for all of those years of service from the moment he was born. So he's had a great training for this job. But if he's anything like his late mother, we saw her working up until Tuesday, and then she sadly passed only a couple of days later. But she had her new PM in, said goodbye to the old PM. She was working up until the very end. That's all she knew. So we can expect the very same from our new King, I can imagine.
And I don't exist here to promote newspapers, whether they are good, bad or indifferent, but I do try and read them all very closely. And I'm just going through, Richard Kay has, this is Prince of Wales returning, is he going to Buckingham Palace or is he heading for Clarence House?
That's Buckingham.
Buckingham Palace, there we are. Well, that's interesting because maybe there's a lunch there or something, or maybe he's going to do some shared homework with his dad, because they'll both be on duty tomorrow night. Just while you watch those pictures, which is where Darren was earlier on telling us it was about to happen, if you've got time, have a look at Richard Kay in the Daily Mail today, page 16-17. The Queen's rather perky last days at Balmoral. It's a lovely observational point that picks up on Pandora's point that, yes, she was working to the last. She was still getting the red boxes and the rest of it, but also she had a shooting party for the Bowes-Lyon cousins, who she was terribly close to, and had a private supper with her a vicar as well from Cracky Church. So these are the scenes inside Westminster Hall as the public process through either side of the coffin of the late Queen, and occasional dignitaries will come in as well. We can't avoid the point, but there is a bit of an argument that on one side there are people who've got in because they're members of Parliament or other great and good, and on the other side are ordinary folk who've queued and queued and queued. I make no comment upon that, save to say we are aware that that is the case, and c'est la vie, c'est la guerre. Now, those are the images there. We're just going to pause from those pictures and just change the subject, but don't worry, it's still about these great events as we... Gosh, that is a very moving picture. The imperial state crown, the orb and sceptre. And on Monday, at the very end of the state funeral in Windsor, those parts of the crown jewels, the most important parts of the crown jewels, will be taken from the coffin and placed upon the altar and returned to the Tower of London. A date is yet to be set, but there will be a coronation for King Charles III, and they will be a part of those incredibly moving moments where he is crowned king, but is also given the, as it were, hallmarks of office that include that orb and that sceptre. Lovely faces, ordinary faces, young and old faces, coming in with the Westminster Cross at the very front of your picture, and those folk coming to pay their last respects to the late Queen. Now, if other events occur, or if we're caught on the hop by another senior member of the royal family, don't worry, I'm with you until 2 o'clock, and we'll cut straight back to it. But I wanted, in planning this programme today between 12 and 2, to reflect a couple of other aspects of the late Queen's life, her passions, her interests, and just how important she was. And you'll know that on this programme I always try and do something that we call Rural Spotlight. So bear with me, because here we go. On the death of the Queen, Farmers Weekly, in its editorial, said, and I quote, "With the Queen's passing, the farming community has lost a great champion of its work. She recognised the integral role agriculture has in shaping the fabric of this country. She was patron of countless farming, animal, educational, community and environmental organisations, societies and clubs, more than 50, from the Farmers Club to the Fell Pony Society, from the National Federation of Young Farmers to the Royal Agricultural Benevolent Institution." She wasn't the first. George III, who many wrongly thought was mad, but wasn't, perfectly reasonable fellow, was just a bit poorly, he was so keen on agriculture that he was also known as Farmer George. And of course, the late Duke of Edinburgh was absolutely hooked on the countryside and agriculture, as is the new king. So, in this week's Rural Spotlight, I thought I'd do my own royal warrant thing, by appointment to farming, royal defenders of this green, fertile and productive land. Joining me now is Delmy Harris for the Board of Management of the National Federation of Young Farmers Clubs. That editorial in Farmers Weekly was amazing.
Yeah, it sums Her Majesty up to a T, really, of her support to the rural network of the UK and beyond. I mean, she was Queen of the countryside, wasn't she, really?
Yes, and didn't have to be. That's what's so extraordinary. How aware were you personally of that passion?
And anything, when you've noticed anything she did with agriculture, she was always beaming. She was always happy to be involved. I don't know if you recall seeing the 90th birthday celebrations and the cows appeared in one of the performances. And there's been a meme going around on social media of when she saw the cows appear, the absolute delight on her face at that moment. And of course, the corgis. Corgis are a herding dog from my own Pembrokeshire county, born and bred. The corgis were founded here, and she had them all her life as well. And I was watching a documentary last night, and she says in it, "I like farming." And everything about her was really rural, the countryside, having the farms, of course, in her estates. You know, I think she had the largest herd of Sussex cows. And I think all the family enjoyed farming as well, even the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren. And, you know, the king himself is a huge supporter of the agricultural industry.
Yeah, and while you were just chatting there, Delmy, we were running some pictures. I don't know why a horse got in there as well, but I'm not complaining because I love horses. But the beautiful shot in Scotland of the late Queen with Highland cattle in the background. But you mentioned there, I want to take you back to something you said, because it really is a serious reflection. This wasn't just a love of animals hobby. I mean, the Windsor farm is a proper, active, functioning farm, and there is a Windsor farm shop as well. They do take it seriously.
Yes, definitely. It was they run an industry. It was they were commercially viable farmers, really, as well. You know, with the Windsor estate, the Sandringham estate, Balmoral, and you know, she understood everything about the work of the farming community. You know, I think at one time I read something in one of the presses this week around the fact that when she was a young girl, she wanted to be a farmer's wife. And technically, she wasn't a farmer's wife, but she was a farmer in everything she did day to day as well, and her delight in everything rural. We could always see in her face when she attended some of the agricultural shows, as we can see now. She enjoyed that part of it, and we were always, as a farming community, delighted to see her presence at any of our events.
Your timing is impeccable, Delmy, because we were just running pictures for people listening to us on radio of the Windsor Great Park Agricultural Show back in the 50s with a magnificent lineup. Oh, somebody, there we are. Well done. He's got the best whatever it was. But they're just amazing livestock being paraded in front of her. And I can just add, going back to the horses thing, the Royal Windsor Horse Show that my wife and I go to every year, one of the great events, but that's equestrian. She really knew everything that needed to be known about the showing ponies and kept a breeding line up in Balmoral as well. It's also interesting, I think, to note, and I'd love to hear your reflections, as it were, from the Young Farmers organisation that you head up, and that attitude of the new generation, that there is not a schism, but there's a debate about the degree to which farming protects the community, the rural community, protects our countryside, versus the big industrial farms that, of course, we need if we're to have enough food. But if you do that, you don't get hedgerows. If you don't do hedgerows, you don't have as much wildlife. The royal family's farms are all very much in that category. They like their hedgerows, they like their moors, and they like it as God intended it to be.
Yeah, and I think that's an important element. The farmers are the guardians of the countryside, really. And I think the royal family set a really good example of being stewards of the countryside. And, I think the young farmers are very involved in all elements of farming and in the community as well, and the passion they have for ensuring that they keep their stock well, they maintain their hedgerows, that wildlife and wildflowers and everything like that are having a place to thrive these days on the farms. And I think that's the way we will continue to probably farm the countryside in a way that provides food for us, as well as making it a beautiful place in rural UK.
Okay, and finally, let's give a hurrah out to Harry, because Harry has a tough old time of it in the press quite often these days. But it's not specifically farming, but it nods to it as well. The Commonwealth canopy of trees and farming. I mean, I know it ourselves, because if you have a terrible gale and storm, you'll occasionally lose a tree, and the rule of the countryside is one down, two more in. So there is it's a practical way of embracing climate change as well as protecting our planet, is it not?
Yeah, exactly. And the Queen's Green Canopy element that we did over the Diamond Jubilee and things is important as well. And I think that's something that has been extended, and the Young Farmers organisation has been supportive of that as well, in ensuring that we supported our patron in her Diamond Jubilee by planting trees. And we'll continue to do so now, hopefully in the memory of the Queen of the countryside.
Delmy, great to meet you and lovely to talk to you. I do know a good number of young farmers in Hampshire, and they work hard, preserve the countryside, but my God, they know how to party as well. And a brilliant organisation, and lovely to spend some time with you this Saturday afternoon. Thank you very much indeed. That's Delmy Harris, who's from the Board of Management of the National Federation of Young Farmers Clubs. And thank you all for what you do, young and old farmers, but particularly young farmers, for sticking to it and seeing it as your future. We really do need you. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News. The time is just coming up to 18 minutes past 1, and today is the third full day of the lying in state of the late Queen's coffin in Westminster Hall. We'll be bringing you all of the latest on that, but first let's take a quick break and give you the latest on the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking dry for most, with sunny periods, a risk of showers in the east. Let's take a look at the details. Across Scotland, it will be a mostly dry afternoon with sunny spells for many. The showers will affect northern and eastern coasts. Generally light winds but breezy at times in the east. For Northern Ireland, a dry afternoon is expected. There will be some cloud around, but there will also be bright or sunny spells at times. Across northern England, this afternoon will be generally dry and fine with bright or sunny spells. There may be the odd shower for eastern coasts. This afternoon across Wales it will be dry with sunny spells. The lengthiest sunny spells will be in the north, with more in the way of cloud across the south of the country. The Midlands will remain widely dry throughout this afternoon, with some sunny spells, especially in the west. More cloud across the east, with a chance of some showers for North Sea coasts. This afternoon across East Anglia there will be some showers for Norfolk and Suffolk coasts. It will be a drier day further inland, with sunny spells possible anywhere across the region. For southern England it will be a dry afternoon with some patchy cloud around. There will be some bright and sunny spells also. It will feel warm in the sunshine. Showers will continue this evening across parts of Scotland, with clear spells developing in southern and western England. And that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
On Monday, we as the United Kingdom gather to mourn, pay tribute and give thanks to Queen Elizabeth II. Here at GB News, we invite you to gather with Anne Diamond, historian David Starkey, and myself, Alastair Stewart, live from Buckingham Palace, Westminster Abbey and Windsor Castle, all day Monday.
Welcome back. You're watching Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News. And we will be with you until 2 o'clock. And then, of course, our coverage will continue. It's already been a truly extraordinary day. We have, in my trade, what we call diary events that we know that's going to happen and that's going to happen. And then suddenly, out of the blue, the King goes walkabout and the Prince of Wales goes walkabout. And then we're watching the vigil in Westminster Hall. And then we get the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and we get the Prime Minister of Canada, and we get the Prime Minister of Australia. And I have a dreadful feeling we may have missed one or two others as well, but it's that kind of day because world leaders are, we're going to say, starting to arrive. They clearly have already arrived, some of them in London, ahead of the Queen's state funeral on Monday, which I was just referring to in that little promotional film that we ran for you. The Queen's state funeral, which begins at 10:44 on Monday, and then the actual service itself in Westminster Abbey begins at 11 o'clock. We're expecting around 500 dignitaries to attend, including the United States President, Joe Biden, and the Emperor of Japan, and pretty well everybody in between. Prime Minister Liz Truss will be meeting her New Zealand and Australian counterparts later today. We saw the Australian Prime Minister, as I said, in Westminster Hall just now, and Jacinda Ardern was going about her business yesterday, I think, but we know that she is meeting the Prime Minister and also the King and the Prince of Wales. So let's cross live now again to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who is there outside Buckingham Palace, where all of that work, that global diplomacy, as well as the family planning of what's going to happen on Monday, is going on behind you. It's a magnificent bit of architecture. It is a royal palace, but it's an office block as well, in a curious way, Darren.
Yeah, and indeed, and it's, Alastair, in many ways, the home of our diplomacy, isn't it? I mean, the countless state banquets that have been held in Buckingham Palace, official receptions for leaders from across the world over time, is quite extraordinary. We keep doing this, King Charles has returned to Buckingham Palace in the last, 30 minutes or so after that walkabout, meeting people in the queue to see, who were lining up to see Queen Elizabeth II lying in state in Westminster Hall. He's returned, and yet there is still lots of frenetic activity here at Buckingham Palace. We every so often see ambassadorial cars, and clearly, actually, as you say, some leaders go in and out of the palace, and that's only going to crank up as we get closer to Monday. We're expecting this big reception tomorrow night, hosted by the King, for some of those 500 odd dignitaries that are going to attend the funeral on Monday. Prime ministers, presidents, kings, emperors, princes, princesses. I mean, it's going to be an extraordinary gathering of some of the most powerful people on the planet. I don't think the UK has seen, or indeed maybe any other country in the world, seen anything quite like this since the state funeral of Winston Churchill back in 1965. Just to give you a sense of some of the names that are going to arrive here, we get that from the meetings that Liz Truss, the Prime Minister, is going to have tomorrow, because it's not just the King who is flexing some of Britain's diplomatic soft power, but indeed the Prime Minister too. She's scheduled to meet Joe Biden, the US President, in Downing Street, Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, Micheál Martin, the Taoiseach from Ireland, and Poland's President Duda as well. And those meetings, we're not really going to get a sense actually of what's said in those meetings, unfortunately, because it's a period of national mourning. They're not recognised as proper bilaterals, but clearly this will be an attempt for the new Prime Minister to also get to know some of those leaders from around the world. But the eyes will be on that big reception tomorrow night, and frankly it is a big challenge, isn't it? Not just for the government and indeed for the Foreign Office, but also for the Metropolitan Police as well, because the security around many of these world leaders will be incredibly tight. We are also expecting them actually to view the coffin, some of them, in Westminster Hall, and as you rightly pointed out, we saw at least Jacinda Ardern, the New Zealand Prime Minister, do that yesterday. I suspect we will see some more of those leaders do that in the next 36 hours or so when they turn up to London. And then also they'll be given a chance, Alastair, to go to Lancaster House, which is not terribly far from here. In fact, it's right next to St James's Palace, so that they can sign a book of condolence.
Just as you're finishing that, and I didn't want to interrupt because we're seeing another changing of the guard there. No woke me, but it was nice to see that there was a woman yeoman warder of the guard there as well, finishing her duty as we look at that extraordinary, I still find it extraordinary images, these young men and women standing rigidly to attention for their 20-minute stints, as and when other folk come back, and as Darren was just saying, if we do see other world leaders, we'll give you a look at that. Darren, to pick up with you again, something that crossed my mind this morning as well was that stick with the politics for a moment, which is your I mean, you have many strong suits, but that's your main one. That Liz Truss has the huge advantage in this extraordinary time where within 10 days we change prime ministers and we change monarchs, that her previous job was as foreign secretary. But you think of someone like James Cleverly, who I know you know very well indeed, the new foreign secretary. I mean, 5 minutes ago he was education secretary, and before that he was doing another job. The learning curve for the new government, as much as for the new monarchy, is incredibly steep.
Indeed, incredibly steep, and we've seen that, haven't we, really, with the Prime Minister, actually, as you say, in the last week or so, in that she has had to step up into, this role of being Prime Minister, in part leading the nation during a period of national mourning. She's been travelling all over the country, attending those services that the King has been as well. But you're right, it is also a big, steep learning curve for all those cabinet ministers. And while kind of politics, if you like, has been put on hold for 10 days, believe me, when the period of national mourning ends, which is next Monday night, so once we get to Tuesday and Parliament comes back on Wednesday, that's when again the cold hard reality of politics is going to hit this government. Cost of living crisis, we're going to get a fiscal statement, Prime Minister's going to New York to address the UN, and then there's party conference season. There is no sign, Alastair, that things are going to get any easier or indeed slow down for any of our politicians once this period of national mourning and the Queen's funeral is finished.
Darren, thank you very much indeed, and we'll come back to you if there are further developments in your neck of the woods. Darren McCaffrey there, our political editor, live for us at Buckingham Palace. And we can cross now live to our South West of England reporter, Jeff Moody, and kind of the framing gives it away because Jeff is indeed at Tower Bridge, and it doesn't take a Londoner to recognise it. There we are. We saw you mingling and chatting earlier on. It is a period of mourning, as Darren was just saying, but there's just the most amazing buzz out there on the streets this afternoon, isn't there, Jeff?
Oh, there really is. I mean, I've decided to do the whole thing. So we started at 9:30 this morning, collecting our wristbands. I've got my wristband on. And we've done however many hours it's been since 9:30 this morning. I've lost track of time. But as everyone's been saying, everyone's making friends, and now we've got to this point, to Tower Bridge. It's a chance just to sort of relax my back for a minute or two, because we need a little sit down. I want to introduce you to Mary Pullen, who's accompanying me on this journey. Hello to you, Mary.
Hi, Jeff.
I want to talk to you. We were talking just now about faith. Now, you are a very strong churchgoer. You have been all your life. How important to you has it been that the Queen is the head of the Church of England? What has that meant to you?
Well, I think what's been so touching is her personal faith and the way she talked about it so comfortably and so openly to everybody in the public. And for her to be head of the Church of England and the way that that links in with the government, that sort of link between state and church, I think is one of the precious things that we have in this country.
Do you think that that King Charles will be as good an ambassador for the Church as the Queen was?
I do believe that he will, yes. I think he also shares a faith, and he also shares an enormous respect for other faiths outside the Church of England. And I think that is really, really precious in this whole idea of the way that the royal family holds the country together. And I have great hope and faith in the future of that.
Because there was talk that the King was going to be defender of faith, wasn't he, rather than defender of the faiths? Yes. Yeah. Fidef. What do you think about that?
I'm completely comfortable with that, because I think faith is something that is, I mean, I am Church of England myself, but I think all faiths are precious and important, and I think part of a pluralistic society is respect and comfortable coexistence of other faiths and all faiths.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mary. Well, we're walking together. It's been an amazing atmosphere so far, I have to admit. Nobody seems to be waning so far, but it is still early. We were told that it could be up to 25 hours, but now we're hearing that it should be a lot less, so hopefully we'll get there by, I don't know, at some point this evening, but we'll keep you informed of our progress. We'll let you know.
Very, very much indeed. You're watching Jeff Moody down there by Tower Bridge, and me, Alastair Stewart, here in the studio. I asked for your emails earlier, and Anthony says, I don't think there'll be this much affection and patriotism for a monarch in the future. You have not been watching what Jeff Moody's just been reporting upon, or earlier on, with the King and the Prince of Wales out and about. A lot of people there. Sue says Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, was also a Queen Consort, but was referred to as Queen. Sooner or later, Camilla's consort world will vanish, and she'll just be known as the Queen. And finally, from Teresa, I've heard lots about most of the royal family, but I've heard little or nothing about Edward. He is a son too, and Sophie, his wife. He and his family have been really close to the Queen and family in the dying days. Well, I've personally banged on a bit about Edward and Sophie Wessex, because I think they've really done a brilliant job, and it hasn't been easy. Edward took over the Duke of Edinburgh's awards when his dad died, and Sophie has, I think, played a blinder. But all of those at Lord Mayor Trelaw's in Hampshire, brilliant school and college for young folk with disabilities, will know why, because Sophie Wessex is our very active royal patron. So we'll try and give a nod to all of those who get in there and do the business. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News. The time is just gone 1:30, just coming up to 1:32, the third full day of the Queen's lying in state in Westminster Hall. We'll bring you all of the latest, but first, let's bring you up to date with all of the other news headlines. Here's Alice Porter.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 1:30. I'm Alice Porter in the GB newsroom. King Charles and Prince William have made a surprise visit, greeting people in the queue to see the Queen lying in state. There were cheers as the King arrived, handshakes and big smiles from people who've been standing in the cold through the night in order to pay their respects. The waiting time stands at around 14 hours. Earlier, the King and Prince of Wales visited the Met Police Special Operations Room, thanking emergency service staff for their work during the period of mourning. King Charles was greeted by the new Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, Home Secretary Suella Braverman and London Mayor Sadiq Khan. The security operation for the state funeral on Monday is set to be the biggest in the Met Police Force's history, surpassing the London Olympics. Later today, Queen Elizabeth's grandchildren will stand guard around her coffin in Westminster Hall. Last night, the late monarch's children, King Charles, the Princess Royal, Duke of York and the Earl of Wessex, held their own 15-minute vigil, honouring their mother. Prince Harry has been given special dispensation by his father to wear his military uniform, despite no longer being a working royal. Prince Andrew has been given the same permission. World leaders will start arriving for the state funeral later today, with around 500 dignitaries expected to attend. Rehearsals were held in Windsor in the early hours of the morning, with the procession moving down the long walk towards the castle gates. Royal pageant master Bruno Peake says a lot of planning has gone into the event.
Rehearsal side is the element that will 99.9% guarantee that you will have a successful event. And again, these guys and these ladies who are actually taking part, well, you know, in the military, this will be such a proud moment for them. So they're going to be making sure that they don't put a step wrong.
In other news, Ukraine says the mass grave discovered in the eastern city of Izium is proof of Russia's war crimes. More than 450 bodies, most of them civilians, were found, some with their hands tied behind their backs. The city was recently liberated after 6 months of Russian occupation. The Kremlin denies it's targeting civilians or committing war crimes. The White House says it'll continue to support Ukraine and hold Moscow accountable. This is what spokesman John Kirby had to say.
It's horrifying. It's repugnant. And sadly, it's in keeping with the kind of depravity and the brutality with which Russian forces have been prosecuting this war against Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. And we're going to continue to actively support efforts to document war crimes and atrocities that Russian forces commit in Ukraine and to assist national and international efforts to identify and hold Russians accountable.
Police investigators are looking at whether race was a factor in the fatal shooting of Chris Kaba by an armed officer in South London. The 24-year-old's family say they're angry that the investigation by the police regulator could take as long as 9 months. Mr. Kaba, who was unarmed, was killed following a police pursuit of his car 2 weeks ago. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Alastair.
Alice, thank you very much indeed. If you've ever been lucky enough to go to Buckingham Palace for one of the royal garden parties, and if you're lucky enough to bump into the late Queen, she was often wont to say, it's so nice that you're here, and I do hope you manage to enjoy the gardens. From an early age, Her Majesty understood the value of gardening, and indeed of gardens themselves, growing up as she did at Royal Lodge, Windsor, where her parents concerned themselves closely with the layout and the planting of woodland gardens. Queen opened 3 gardens for the National Garden Scheme during her reign. When the King was still Prince of Wales, he was patron, but he will continue now that he is King. One wonders. Well, I'm hoping that the man who will know is my next guest, and that's the Chief Executive of the National Garden Scheme, George Plumtree. Great to see you. A difficult time for any charity, because we were just talking to Safa earlier on, and they have Prince Michael of Kent as their patron, but that which was the late Queen's, does it automatically become the new King's?
To be honest, I think like most of us, I'm not entirely clear, but I think there is an acceptance that there is a certain group of patronages which go with the crown, and they will pass to the King automatically. Therefore,
and in terms of his interests, I mean, Highgrove, there are others, Dumfries House and what have you, but the gardens at Highgrove are a staggering badge of honour for gardening.
Oh, they're wonderful. And he gave us an open day there this year for our garden owners and volunteers, which was wonderful. And he's been a great supporter as our patron. He took on the position from his grandmother in 2002. He writes a foreword for our annual guidebook, which is very interesting now as a sort of series of his thoughts about gardening and the world of gardening from one year to the next. It's been a great thing for us to have. But of course, the late Queen was a wonderful supporter of ours. And I think for us, the important thing is our royal connections go right back to our foundation, because we were started to raise money for a memorial fund for Queen Alexandra, who died in 1925. As you probably know, she was a great patron of nursing. She was patron of the Queen's Nursing Institute. And they started this idea of getting people to open gardens to raise money, and that money went into the memorial fund.
Victoria was a great flower presser.
Yes, that's right.
Whereas more recently, there have been great flower growers, which is slightly better.
But, of course, her son, King George V, immediately said, oh, we must support this. We'll open the garden at Sandringham. 96 years later, Sandringham is one of only 2 gardens that has opened in every single year of our history, except 2020 when we all closed. So that's a really long and wonderful connection. The second of our 3 is unique in a completely different way. It's the garden at Frogmore, which the Queen's father first gave permission to open in 1946. That has the distinction of having raised more funds for us than any other single garden.
Oh, really?
And no one will
On the
get
Isle of
near.
Wight?
No, the Frogmore in Windsor Great Park.
Frogmore in Windsor Great Park, sorry, beg pardon, yes.
Partly because of the connection where that's where Victoria and Albert's mausoleum is. So as well as gardeners, we get a lot of royal enthusiasts. But, I mean, it's an amazing contribution.
The other thing, we were talking earlier on about, as it were, and I will use the word consciously, that the late Queen's hinterland, I mean, did the job brilliantly, everybody admired her, and we were talking about the military connections and this, that and the other. But one of the things that came across loud and clear in a brilliant conversation that was filmed between herself and David Attenborough, walking around the gardens at Buckingham Palace, was this wasn't just someone who put the marigolds on and got a trowel out of the way. God, she knew her stuff.
Oh, she did, absolutely. And as a practical gardener, the Queen was, without doubt, best known for planting trees. She planted thousands of trees. But she knew all of the characteristics of most of the trees she ever planted. She would tell you if it was a tilia or an ulmus or a fagus, and she was really interested. And the Queen's Green Canopy, which we celebrated, and I was lucky to be on one of the committees, the Platinum Jubilee with... She was closely involved in what was going on.
It's a wonderful picture, I think, of her and the new king on the Balmoral estate doing some planting.
Planting a tree there, yes. No, it was... But I think the other really fascinating thing is for the Queen is her gardens were places to relax. She saw that whole link between gardens and people's general state of well-being, and for her that was... really important. I remember a lovely story, because I did a book about the Royal Garden many years ago, and I visited Balmoral, and I remember chatting to the head gardener about their amazing display in their glass house, and it was just before the Queen took up residence for the summer, and he said, oh, every year one of the first things Her Majesty does when she arrives is come down to see what's in the glass house on display, and chats to me about the different varieties.
Wonderful. For folk who are listening to our conversation, George, on radio, because we do both TV and radio, that's the scene at Green Park. Floral tributes from just ordinary folk, and they've outside Buckingham Palace and elsewhere, and they're slowly being moved towards Green Park. Just explaining to folk what that is if they are listening on radio. But you mentioned Balmoral, which segues beautifully to what was going to be my final question to you anyway. And that was that when we had the first glimpse of the late Queen's coffin coming out of Balmoral to be put into the royal hearse to be taken to St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh, the most magnificent wreath on top.
Yes.
And the commentators, I can't recall who it was, and it doesn't matter, but it was a job well done, pointed out that they were pickings from the Balmoral Gardens.
Absolutely, and I'm not at all surprised. I think both the Balmoral Garden and the Sandringham Garden, because they were the royal family's private country home, so they could do what they liked in the garden, and the development of the gardens was very much them doing what they wanted, and the late Queen was no exception. She loved them.
And hurrah for regal pour encourager les autres, as they say. So many great gardens up and down the country open now, not least to your fine efforts and the example of the late Queen.
Absolutely.
Good. George, great to meet you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thoroughly enjoyed it, and thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Now, where are we? Here we are. It's 18 minutes to 2. And I'm with you until 2 o'clock, and then our coverage will carry on, as I've tried to stress all the way through. We have Alice doing news bulletins, but if something else happens out and about there involving the great and good of the world or the royal family here, we'll cut to it as well. But we want to carry on with our overview of what we are reflecting upon and building up to the great state funeral on Monday. From Marmite to razor blades and famous shops, by appointment to Her Majesty the Queen, or indeed to any royal, is a cherished badge of honour. Royal warrants, as they're known, are in their personal gift, a way of thanking businesses that have done them good service. And my next guests, Emma and David Quenby, are an example of that. As Prince of Wales, the now King, honoured them, look at them smiling quite rightly, for their Welsh farmhouse apple juice. And I'm delighted that they have come to discuss it. I mean, you have to, I mean, I know because I've read the briefing notes, but you two have got to share with GB News viewers and listeners how it came to pass, because you kind of started off as suppliers to him, didn't you?
Correct, yes. Well, it started, my father received a phone call to go and identify some trees, some apple trees that they didn't know what they were in mid-Wales. He doesn't usually do that, but he decided to go down and have a look. He was told it might be worth his while, so he made the way down to Llandovery and went to Llanywyrmod Estate. Wasn't sure whose estate it was, and looked around the orchards. Very, very interesting place, and was told at the end that it indeed was Prince Charles's estate, the Llanywyrmod estate near Llandovery. So very, very interesting place. And I was asked then whether, well, basically Prince Charles had tried our juice, really, really enjoyed it, and asked whether we would be prepared to make juice for him, which he quickly agreed to, as you can imagine. And
he did.
He decided sort of about 5 years later or so, he'd like to come and visit the farm and see how it was produced. So we had a royal visit in summer of 2014, and the royal warrant was issued January 2015. So a very, very proud moment for the whole family, as you can imagine.
Emma, have you got a flask, or have you got something that you can hold up to show us?
We don't, actually.
Sorry about that.
It's our fault. We were supposed to ask you to do that, but just everybody close their eyes for a moment and imagine little crest and what have you, and there it is. The question that follows that, and it's a totally serious question. Emma, take it first, and David, come in if you want to do. Once you've got it, you've got to maintain standards. You two are not just amateurs making, fruit juice from a few spare apples if you happen to have an apple tree in your garden. You've got to meet a standard that he approves of, and you've got to maintain it. Emma?
That's exactly right. So I think a lot of people don't realise that in order to be awarded the warrant, you have to meet very kind of strict requirements in terms of your economic impact and in terms of your environmental impact and your sustainability policies. And so it's a real honour for us to have been given this award, because it does recognise all of those things and the hard work that we do.
Yeah. What we make is quite difficult to make, and it does require a lot of hard work.
Just stop for a minute. Oh, can we go back? Oh, no, we can't. Is this moving? No, it's because we had the two of you standing there, and I could see the royal crest there. It was above the letter W, but we're now looking at a bottle, which I'm sure... Oh, yeah, it is there at the bottom, isn't it? Right in the middle. That's the little crest, and it just absolutely delightful. I butted in, Emma. I'm so sorry. You were talking about maintaining those strict standards. If you do, David, Emma, whichever you like, do you know yet whether it will become by appointment to His Majesty the King, having been by appointment to His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales?
We don't have any indication yet as to whether it will follow King Charles as he is now into his position, or we will stay with being sort of associated with the Prince of Wales, who obviously will now be William. So eager to find out, obviously, but the review will go on over the coming weeks and months, and there are more pressing things going on at the moment, obviously, with the passing of the Queen, which we send out our deepest sympathies to the royal family at this time. But yeah, we will, I'm sure, find out in due course.
Emma, it just strikes me, I know you're very much a double act, that the way to crack that little issue then is for you, the two of you, to invite the Prince and Princess of Wales to come down to the farm and to the factory, so that they can both see and be impressed in the way that the King was when he was Prince of Wales. So no pressure there on you, Emma.
Absolutely not at all. No, I'm looking forward to it, to be quite honest.
Let me ask you both this as well, and I don't mean to lower the tone. It's not an attempt to do anything daft like that. But economically, I'm guessing that it does have an impact on trade, because you walk down any supermarket aisle or even in a farmer's shop, if you see that little crest and it says by appointment too, there is an element of it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me as well. Is it a boost and a boon to trade, David?
The short answer is yes. Obviously, having and holding a royal warrant is a sign of quality, and we're very proud of what we do. And to be recognised by such an award is huge for for our company. We're only very small, and Prince and King Charles, now as he is, has always been very supportive of small Welsh businesses. So yes, we're very proud to hold it and would like to continue supplying to the royal household, obviously.
No, well, I'm fingers crossed on that. I did say final question, but there are two parts to it. And again, when I was reading the briefing notes, we're lucky enough to have a couple of apple trees and pear trees at home as well. And we don't make juices, but what my wife does do is things like chutneys and jams. Are you so good at what you do that you are juicers, full stop? Or do you occasionally think, we might try and do a bit of this, we might try and do a bit of that?
We've got a few plans in the pipeline, definitely. A couple of things that we're working on, but obviously, trade secrets will stay trade secrets for now. But yeah, definitely watch this space.
All right, well, we will watch this space, and in two senses. The minute that you get agreement from William and Catherine to come down and see the farm, let me know, and we'll be there with you. And the minute you launch the new product, come and tell us first, and we'll help you launch it as well, because you've done so well. And I know you're a busy working couple, so thanks for breaking into it this Saturday afternoon to spend time. And fingers crossed that it either now falls to William or the King will take it with him. We'll see how it goes. But Emma and David Quemby, a real pleasure talking to both of you. Warmest congratulations. And do keep in touch. That's serious. David and Emma there of the Welsh Farmhouse Apple Juice Company. Good to them. So, from royal warrants to ceremonials to animals, charities, all sorts of things. Where do our conversations today over the last hour and 50 minutes take us? King's waited all his life for this job, but what's his agenda? What's the lie of the land for him and his kingdom? His namesakes embrace both extremes. Charles I lost his head to revolution, not least for his intransigence over the divine right of kings. Charles II, on the other hand, was restored to his executed father's throne and launched an age of enlightenment. So what are the prospects for Charles III? I asked the team to inquire of the great Sir Anthony Selden if he might join me to discuss these matters, and I'm delighted to say that he said yes. Anthony, always a pleasure to see you, and thanks for finding time for us this Saturday afternoon. Let's start with the institution of monarchy itself. How safe is it, in your view, in Charles III's hands?
Well, I don't think he'll lose his head, Alastair. And I think that monarchies around the world are in trouble. They tend either to become absolute, like in Saudi Arabia, where they don't tolerate dissent or a free media, or they are largely irrelevant and vanilla. So to have a vital democracy, it happens in Japan, but the number of monarchies are dwindling, and the numbers of meaningful democracies are really Britain and just one or two others. So you've got to say that it's a challenge. And then on top of that, he's got the future cohesion of the United Kingdom. Will Scotland remain in? Will Ireland unite? The Commonwealth. And then will people accept him as somebody of very pronounced views, not everybody's views, although the agendas move more in his direction on the environment than it did when he first started articulating them. But, you know, taking over the Queen, I mean, no one wants to take over from the most famous woman in the world and the most loved leader this country has seen for decades. I mean, it's a tough act. And he's
Totally.
73, Alastair.
And absolutely, and timing is perfect, because just while you were concluding that thought, Anthony, we were looking at pictures of folk, young and old, across the generations, queuing up to join that vigil by the late Queen's coffin. All of the polling, and we did some ourselves, is about 3-1 in favour of retaining the monarchy. To what extent should we be cautious, Anthony, that clearly reflects the emotion of the moment, it reflects the affection for the late Queen, as opposed to a genuine embracing of what to many is an entirely illogical institution?
Yes, well, it's gone down, Alastair. There was 75% a decade ago, according to YouGov, and that's now down to 62% while the Queen was still alive. Maybe that was partly a reaction against Prince Andrew and Harry and Meghan, who knows? But it did decline. It's now seems to have come back up. My sense is there's a steady state of about 70% of the country who do like the monarchy and want it to continue. And obviously this has been a fantastic platform for people to identify with, and milling amongst the crowds in the last 3 days. It's deeply moving. I mean, they're not going to do that for any prime minister, however great a prime minister might be. There's something about the head of state, the monarch, that unites all those who want to be united by him or her. Can Charles acquire in his own way something of that same love and loyalty, admiration? I think he can certainly try with his hard work and support for the kind of causes that we've just been hearing about so beautifully, and good works, good deeds. He will certainly do all that. But, you know, I mean, when she succeeded to the throne, she was a young, very beautiful woman. We all felt, well, I wasn't alive, felt protective towards her. And she had a wonderful, resplendent husband. You know, there was a lot to love and lock on to. More difficult for him, but I think he's certainly going to, obviously, he means what he says. He's going to give it his very best shot, and his task will be carrying that delicate vase of the monarchy across the hall for as long as he is able to carry the vase. And at that point, then William will take it on.
Indeed. Perfectly on that point, Anthony, about he means what he says. I've said it twice on the programme already, but that extraordinary address he gave to the nation within days of becoming, if not hours of becoming king, he said he's aware in his new role that he has to withdraw somewhat from the issues that he'd embraced, the causes that he pushed. And yet there he is in Wales yesterday, talking to the First Minister about his concerns over the cost of living crisis. You're a great historian as well as a great biographer, and you will remember as well as I did immediately hearing those words. Edward VIII, as Prince of Wales over 100 years ago, in South Wales, racked by unemployment and depression, saying something must be done. It caused a storm then. The new king embracing the cost of living crisis may or may not cause a storm now.
It's very tricky, Alastair, isn't it? I mean, I do think he's an infinitely better man than the very shabby Edward VIII, but he's going to upset people. The moment he starts making any political statement, which the Queen always avoided, she was even correct with Paddington Bear over tea not to get into political conversations. The moment you do that, you'll upset somebody. And he's simply got to avoid doing that. And anyway, he doesn't need to do it because people know what he thinks. So is the cost of living something that affects so many people? Is that somehow beyond politics? I don't know. If the reaction is negative, that will be a slap on the wrist for him and a reminder that he is no longer Prince of Wales. He is the king representing everybody, and that means that you have to be above politics if you want to remain in that position, and if you want to keep the kind of levels of loyalty and support and love that Her Majesty the Queen had.
And finally, briefly, Anthony, we're looking at pictures of him doing walkabout, handshaking. He's even been kissed by the crowd. And just a couple of hours ago, we saw him and the Prince of Wales go walkabout, chatting to the people, queuing up to pay their respects to his late mother and William's late grandmother. Does that matter?
I think it matters to him a lot, Alastair, because now people are focusing on him, and the monarch gains energy from an encouragement from the looks and the way that they are treated. So that's a good indication. I mean, personally, but I'm a monarchist. I want the monarchy to survive, and that means that Charles has to find his own way of doing it, not, honouring his mother and following the best traditions of his mother, but a different personality, a different time, finding somehow his own voice, which is something that around which everyone who wants to unite around the monarchy feels they can unite and feel proud to call Charles their king.
Anthony, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Anthony Selden there, and you've been watching Alastair Stewart and Friends, and there are few better than Sir Anthony Selden. This is GB News TV and Radio. That's all we have time for today, but I hope very much indeed that you'll be able to join us tomorrow. We'll start again at 12, but we'll have a 3-hour programme to look ahead to the Queen's state funeral that will, of course, be taking place on Monday. But let me, for today, say thank you and leave you with the weather. Bye-bye.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking dry for most with sunny periods, a risk of showers in the east. Let's take a look at the details. Across Scotland, it will be a mostly dry afternoon with sunny spells for many. The showers will affect northern and eastern coasts. Generally light winds but breezy at times in the east. For Northern Ireland, a dry afternoon is expected. There will be some cloud around, but there will also be bright or sunny spells at times. Across northern England, this afternoon will be generally dry and fine with bright or sunny spells. There may be the odd shower for eastern coasts. This afternoon across Wales, it will be dry with sunny spells. The lengthiest sunny spells will be in the north, with more in the way of cloud across the south of the country. The Midlands will remain widely dry throughout this afternoon with some sunny spells